Okay, hi everybody. This is day 1891, and I hope everything is labeled right. Just a lot of updates, and I noticed the last few days it wasn't registering. Anyway, but know this, that we come on every day, even if it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning, we will come on. A lot of things are happening in the background, and even though we're at 1,891 days, so much is happening right now. We have a new commander in chief, right? We have a new administration. We have not just a new administration, we have an entirely different administration than what the United States has ever had, I think, since George Washington, really. Because George Washington, um, this is continuing a lot of the conversations I had before I came on live just now. But George Washington, was really under the same kind of internal um, enemy within. It was a huge battle. There was no other president until now that has met with that kind of internal enemy within. Um, what George Washington went through, and he wrote about, oh my gosh, that tens of thousands. I think it was 70,000. No, anyway, I gotta go look at my notes again from homeschooling. But he wrote thousands and thousands of letters. Uh, for at that time when there was no Xerox, right? Um, eh, that time he wrote by hand many, many thousands and thousands of letters, and then would rewrite them after a time went by. And you would think, oh, he's tampering. But he would rewrite, and all of those letters are for everyone to see and even compare in the library there at Mount Vernon, online library also. And you can compare these letters that he would go back and make sure that the grammar was proper. He wasn't, um, I I don't want to say highly educated, um, because he was so smart, right? He was such a great president, George Washington was. And when you read the letters, you'll understand how great he was. Um, but he wasn't highly educated, meaning he didn't go up through the ranks, or when he was a child, get the best of the best kind of tutoring like his brother did, his half brother did. He was never expected, because he was from a second marriage. He was never expected to get the property that he did, and get the position that he did. That was supposed to go to his older half brother. Um, but God, God chooses who He wills, and there's no stopping it. And George Washington, just amazing, amazing. And we're so blessed as a country to have him. And if you've never studied the Fairfax Resolves, you need to do that, because that was very early on one of the resolves from Fairfax, Virginia, a meeting there, was that these gentlemen, including George Washington, resolved to end the evil slave trade. Okay, the resolve to end the evil slave trade, and how to do it. How to do it to provide an economy that would um, give all people in the United States um, basic income, right? Earned income, not welfare, not welfare. That was never his intention. And there was other many resolves that, of course, is connected to England, Great Britain, to to get freedom for the American people. And I think that the Fairfax resolves are probably just one of the most important uh, parts of our history that everyone should study. And I never studied it in school or in university. I didn't really even know about them until I started homeschooling and did my own inquiries into American history. And they're so important to understanding what's happening today with President Trump, because it's not um, something that you can just do. I've heard, of course, being online, there is so much like, perp walk this person, where are they arrests, and of course, I say from the beginning, these people need to be arrested. Um, and we've, in our frustration, um, we've had to really, really pray to stay calm in all of this because of knowing what they did to our son. We've had to stay very, very calm because we know they stole our son's body and they trafficked his body after they brutally took his life. And this is they who, well, squarely, it happened on Fort Bliss. So this is the armies, this is the United States Army's um, crime, really. It really is. They had a duty to our son. Um, and of course, they lied to us continuously and severely, and even applied asymmetric warfare tactics against us to get us, so miserable that we'd stop. But we didn't. We didn't. We pushed through it, just like President Trump's family. And this is what's so amazing with George Washington and his family, and the Trump family and our family, is that when you are targeted, and of course, our family, well, when you are so targeted that you absolutely have evidence that there is a deep state, that there is an enemy within, um, and the rest of the people, you have to convince the public, look, there's an enemy within, and they're targeting people that want justice, that want to make America great again, or to want to make us free, right? Free from the hands of those that want to keep slavery. This is what George Washington was trying to do. And of course, there were so many that loved slavery, right? And there is so many that still love slavery today, called criminal trafficking, human trafficking. Um, Looking at César Peniche's cases, the Black case, I forgot his first name, but a polygamist named Black, he had many wives. The wives didn't even know, they didn't even know their origin. They didn't even know their origin. Um, and of course, 3 Americans were young men were brutally, their lives were taken brutally and buried there on Blacks' property in Mexico, in Chihuahua, Mexico. And you know, it, but the big point um, is that these women that were part of this polygamist, uh, they didn't even know their origin. So, what age were they when they were brought into this and subjected to this? And, why in the world does, Mexico think it's a good idea to let polygamy be legal? The I can tell you from the very beginning, I said this was one big sex cult. There's this underlining, um, common denominator of a Mormon faction, and also that this is a sex cult. Um, and, I could go into great detail about all the evidence that we have about that to substantiate that. And it is robust. It is a mountainous amount of evidence. But I can tell you that it exists and it is very damning to both. Uh, it makes you wonder, uh, w- there's a big group that likes slavery and polygamy. Um, I wouldn't say is the cause of it, but it sure doesn't help at all this criminal trafficking um, culture, right? It is because when you have that culture, um, and you have these problems with the human trafficking, that requires drugs, like the children that they trafficked, hundreds of thousands of children. Now we know that they were drugged with these laced gummies that they were given. So drugs are a big part of it, and then the drugs become a money maker, and they traffic drugs. Of course, they do. And this whole uh, aim of President Trump right now, he says this is to stop the flow of poison into the United States, and that's what he's talking about, right? The big F and many, many other substances that do not help society at all, kill a lot of people, kill a lot of people. And if you have gummies that are laced, I'm sure because hundreds of thousands of children are no longer alive. They're no longer alive. And it would be interesting to know if part of that reason would be because of these laced gummies, um, to keep them drugged, these children. And because everyone knows if you have children, children are a lot of work. You have to really love them. You have to really love them. Um, because you have to take care of them, you know? Uh, so all of these children that they said were unaccompanied, I called BS very early on with that because there's no way, um, because children need so much care. Uh, you know, it's crazy to, then they were taken, right? They were taken and they were drugged, and now the evidence is coming out. Not what I found. Of course, what I found is mountainous. What our family has found is mountainous. But what now the law enforcement is saying? The law enforcement is saying that they were drugged, and in order to do this kind of trafficking, this kind of modern day human slavery, you have to have a lot of guns. and because you're dealing with the drugs and you're dealing with being illegal. And the whole polygamy thing is a big part of this. I'm going to tell you that right now. It's a very big part of this. And I don't know why Mexico calls these uh, this Mormon faction that left the country, the United States, because they didn't like the laws here, right? So they don't have respect for laws. They have enough respect for laws to move out of the country to carry on their polygamy. But the problem is they live in the United States. They go back and forth. They have addresses in the United States. They want the benefits of the United States, but they want to skirt the laws. And as modern times has come, the women have found their own voice. Sometimes, and it has been for their detriment, because then they feel like, if my husband can have a lot of women, then I can have a lot of men. And so the whole family is just destroyed, right? The family's just destroyed, and the children are, let's just say there's a lot of evidence that repeats what um, Leilani Hart confessed to in her affidavit, in her notarized affidavit, of just the worst type of crimes against children. And that is repeated over and over again. And, you see this problem surfacing over and over again. And even in the Charlie Kirk's assassination case, you see the evidence of this sex cult um, consequences raising its ugly head. And of course, we can't get to the bottom of the Charlie Kirk assassination without really addressing the elephant in the room that nobody wants to say, and that's the Mormon faction element of this. The Mormon faction element of the school, the Mormon faction element of his own staff, the Mormon faction element of the Twigs, the connection with the Mormon faction of El Paso with Woody Hunt, who's absolutely criminal. He's absolutely criminal and up to no good. And it was, this is that elephant in the room. They're not even talking about it. They're talking about the ballistics and everything, which is very right, and we know everything has been tampered with. Why has everything been tampered with? Why wasn't the scene secured? Why? What is going on right now? It's very creepy what's even going on right now around that whole case. It's very creepy, like what happened around Richard's case, right? Just the same playbook, the same creepiness, the same breaches of security. What his security doesn't check roofs. The president's security doesn't check roofs. And no one's saying the elephant in the room about the attempted assassination on President Trump, and that is this Mormon faction element that needs to be investigated, um, because their loyalties, it's going back to George Washington, their loyalties are not to the country. This is our suspicion with overwhelming evidence that they have their loyalties to their religious affiliation, and not to the country. It doesn't allow for um, the number one loyalty to be to the country, in their positions when they're taking their oath, and you can say to Christians or soft or whatever, but when they take an oath, they're taking an oath to God, they're taking an oath to protect the Constitution, and you know, so it's a little bit different than this Mormon faction. Okay, it's a lot different than this Mormon faction, and it's very connected to the assassination attempts on President Trump, this assassination on Charlie Kirk, and of course in the murder and the body theft of our son and the trafficking of our son's body. It's very connected, and so those are the major common denominators, being part of the system, being in this Mormon faction, and being part of a sex cult. I mean, really, it's, and I just can't even tell you all the details because just know Richard said it best, Mom. It's so bad. It's so bad. And it is. It's, I'm I have this case that I'm supposed to report on about this woman, and she's in the cartel Jalisco new generation, and I mentioned it yesterday, and she's like some kind of evil demon, right? Going after young women that are with babe and taking the baby and then taking their organs, and I guess they go to Plenitude Crematorium after that, or one like it. Um, and it's so evil that I have a very hard time even just kind of writing about it. Um, because it's very connected to Richard's case, because of the level that they're willing to go to. Um, and that can't just be for the money, y'all. Okay. That has to be, require a very sick, demonic person to carry out what they did there, um, with the C-sections for the baby and the organs, and also what they did to Richard. And it takes a very sick people to run something like this mortuary, funeral, body recycling, uh, Plenitude Crematorium. It's just very sick, very demonic. So and then to be connected to a Mormon faction, it makes you really, uh, gulp and take a step back and say, what in the world is this religion? What in the world is it? Because they mean a lot of harm with the deception of being benevolent, right? With the deception of being just wonderful and patriotic, and always taking these beautiful pictures and everything. I mean, really beautiful pictures. But the evidence, the what's going on is absolutely sick and demonic. So, and that's very hard to report on, um, because very few people are reporting on it. Because of course Woody Hunt is a billionaire, and he has a lot of power even in Mexico. And so it was Woody Hunt. We have confirmation on this with Paul Foster, okay, who is another power broker for El Paso, with his wife Alejandra de la Vega, that brought in Cesar Peniche as the Attorney General for Chihuahua from Mexico City. He's from Mexico City. And it was on the request of these three that he was brought into, um, selected. It's not voted in like the United States. They get appointed. So he was then appointed as the Attorney General for Chihuahua at the suggestion of, a very powerful suggestion, like you either do it or you do it, right? You either do it or you do it. A very powerful suggestion by these three power brokers. Now, Alejandra de la Vega is very interesting because she worked for the Mauro Campos governor. Okay, for I think she was secretary of the economics or economy, something like this. So she was a peer. She was a peer of Cesar Peniche. She worked alongside him. Okay. This is a huge conflict of interest for an American citizen to be working for a foreign government. And I don't, so far I haven't seen anything that she registered as a foreign agent and let the government know. I don't see anything like that. But I do know that they're very connected. All of them are very connected to this Mormon faction that are up to no good. And now, of course, the FBI is looking into the connections with Cesar Peniche with the National Oil Company. Okay. And, I posted up about that. And so this criminal network was tapping into the pipelines illegally, right? Stealing oil illegally. And it was the Attorney General of Chihuahua, Cesar Peniche, that was doing the paperwork to launder it, right? Um, to launder this major crime in order to sell the oil. And this is what the FBI is investigating right now. And in July, and this is all connected to our son's case, okay? It's all connected to our son's case, which means it's connected to the U.S. Army, okay? So, because the U.S. Army is responsible for what happened to Richard, and it was Cesar Peniche who interfered on behalf of protecting the U.S. Army against Richard, a U.S. Army soldier in the state of Chihuahua in Mexico, and interfered and tampered with our son's case, tampered with his file, and he's on record. So this is not, an allegation. This is a confirmation that he did this. And so this is super serious because it brings the U.S. Army into this criminal nexus that was stealing oil. Oil prices are still pretty high. And it makes you, of course, if oil is being stolen, the prices are going to stay high. So, but I just want everyone to know that we did get information that that's being investigated by this administration, and that President Trump needs everybody's support because what he is doing is just extraordinary. Extraordinary because we're sick and tired of our family members dying of anything laced with drugs that can kill us, um, with the targeting of children, grooming of children, with the criminal trafficking of children, of humans, the trafficking of weapons and ammunition, and not only that, but anything that's not bolted down on that Fort Bliss, I'm telling you. Um, and of course, we were on Fort Bliss, so we understand the level of criminality that was going on there, and that the security was totally breached, for the benefit of criminal traffickers. Okay, so it was absolutely at the highest levels there, and in connection with uh, Woody Hunt and Paul Foster and Alejandra de la Vega. So that brings in, a lot of people in the Texas government, right? Yeah. And it brings in a lot of people in the Chihuahuan government. Now, Mexican President Sheinbaum just visited Juarez and took the power away from Governor Maru Campos. Um, she was left um, in a bad way, in a very, very bad way. And so this raid on a mansion in the finest part of Juarez, on the mansion of César Peniche, who can't even live there anymore. He ran over into Texas. Okay, he's in Texas. Um, so it's kind of like this whole thing with Quran, right? Um, Arliano Quran, Raphael Quran, the owner of Plenitude Crematorium. He didn't stay in Mexico, he's in Texas. So, there's a lot happening behind the scenes. Um, and of course, we don't have, even though we have a lot of intelligence coming in all the time, that's even better than what anybody is really reporting in the news. I would say our intelligence is just jaw dropping. The president, of course, has us beat. He has um, huge knowledge um, on what has been happening since, I would say, 2015, 2016 for sure. What's been happening, because he was under attack. And see, when you're under attack, when your whole finances, everything you've built, your family, everything is under attack, it forces you, it drives you to investigate and figure out who's doing this to you, right? And why are they doing this to you? And how can you stop them legally without going to prison for the rest of your life? Because, of course, they wanted President Trump to go to prison for the rest of his life, because the judiciary was and is still, they're working on it, is compromised. So when the judiciary is compromised, and you saw how they were going after President Trump for trifles, right? For trifles. And allowing someone like Black, the polygamist, the Mormon faction polygamist, with 3 American young men corpses buried in his yard. Just walk on that. Just walk, right? When you see something like that, um, when you see P. Diddy, 4 years? When you see um, uh, Molinar, right? When you see William Molinar, the predator, right? The predator, the worst type of crimes against children, get probation, right? Uh, and then they're coming after President Trump for nothing, really for nothing, and really willing to try to put him, I mean, destroy everything. What was it, like $450 million they wanted him to pay in that stupid case? Um, I mean, it was so obvious that they were after him. And so the scales of justice are really wacky, and he has to work very, very hard. That's what he's doing. He's working very hard to put the scales of justice, um, you know, uh, what do you call it when you're, um, there's a word for it and I'm looking for it. But to equalize, and that's not the word I'm looking for, it's right on the tip of my brain. But to equalize the scales again so that we have true justice. It is really amazing to see that the group that's doing this are so connected, right? They're so connected. And, I can't, you be the judge. You be the judge when Patrick Crusius looks so much like James Bonneau Montoya, and Jonathan Ambrose, right? Jonathan Caleb Ambrose. Um, they both with Patrick Wood Crusius, they score very high on facial analysis, meaning they measure the brow and the eyes and the nose and the lips and the cheeks and, hairline and all of that. They measure all of those. And the analysis is like, wowzer, wowzer. They're very connected. So, we wanted to put that out for you to understand that that's just one little piece of an irregularity that show, because we were so attacked, because our son was, of course, they took his life. You're driven to investigate, right? And these are the things you find that it's hard for anybody that is not driven to investigate to really understand. It's very difficult. I don't, Richard just told us it's very, very bad. And of course, it was cartel, of course, and we knew that. We talked about that. We talked about the criminality. Um, it was very, very bad, right? So, but I don't think that. Well, I know that we didn't even imagine the enemy within. And I would call it the deep state, right? I would call it the deep state because it fits. It fits, if it acts like a duck and walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck, right? This is a deep state because they're inside. They're inside the DPS. They're inside the El Paso PD. They're inside the FBI. They're inside the military. They're inside the ATF. They're inside, right? So it is the enemy within. It is the deep state. And so how can there be just such a mess of investigation surrounding um, the Charlie Kirk assassination, right? Because the local, um, everything local around him needs to be investigated because They just tampered and obstructed an entire assassination case. And they did that with the attempted assassination of President Trump. This is how how they how they move, right? They were washing down the rooftop. What weren't they? Right after, I mean, they wouldn't even let the investigators um, look at the crime scene. So something is very. It's all well. Let's just say I'm positive, and I'm going to answer Laura. I'm going to read Laura's comments, um, and I thank you for coming on. Um, it's just trying to, go through all, see, it's the transparency is that you see the negative, that you see the crime, right? You see the crime. Um, and then, that's a little depressing because the crime is so bad. Um, but we have to get to this point where we look straight at the gates of hell, right? So that we can prosecute it, right? So we can document it, file it, and prosecute it. And that's where we're at. And that's where you come in, um, to be vigilant, um, to identify the crimes, to document the crimes, to file the crimes, and then to share it online, to share it. Of course, you have to be very careful if there's children involved and all of that, with the doxing and that. You don't want to dox, but you have to share the information because otherwise they work under this deceptive persona or a facade, right? They have this deceptive facade, or they work as anonymous, right? As anonymous, or as impersonators. So you have impersonation, you have a facade, you have a persona, a false persona. Um, so uh, and they put that in their documents, right? They put that in their documents and everything. And so you have to really see it. It has to be exposed for you to understand that they have, um, that they just live a deception. And the deception is on us, uh, you know, and that they, uh, really are everywhere. Are everywhere. It's a very, very deep state, y'all. Yeah, they are. They control a lot of things, boy. Um, and so and they have to, in order to cover up something like our son's case or Charlie Kirk or even assassination attempt on the president of the United States, right? So that they're not, small fry. But whatever their size is, they're nothing compared to God. And that's what you have to be positive on. They're nothing compared to God. They're just nothing. And, you know, they look at Woody Hunt, his own organization, El Paso Matters, is what implicated him, totally implicated him. So he built it to implicate others, to get rid of his enemies or whistleblowers or whatever. Badger them, smear them, falsely smear them, create false stories and run the false stories to destroy their character or their chances in politics and positions. He created that for that. I mean, this is how evil and how criminal Woody Hunt is. Okay. And he hides himself behind a persona of El Paso Community Foundation, like he's someone benevolent, or UTEP or Texas Tech University Health Science, like we give so much, and we have our school of business, and we're so wonderful. Our business is so good. Yeah, right. Criminal trafficking billions of dollars and ruining so many people's lives. Um, you know, he's just very, very evil. Very, very, very evil. Um, and I would just be a bad person if, no better, if I didn't tell you what we know. So, there you have it, you know. It's the truth, and he's responsible for even bringing in, um, AG César Peniche, that has done so much damage in Chihuahua and to the people that live in Mexico. So much damage, right? And you'll see the same common denominators of who he protects. And he's just up to no good. And, stealing fuel when in Mexico, those pipelines are national, they're not privately owned. Um, so he's really just to uh, participate in that kind of theft, to wash it and then to sell it. Um, it's it's just and then to go and live in a mansion in the finest area. And I have nothing against living in a mansion if you've worked very hard, to get there, honestly, even with some mistakes. But no, Peniche uh, got there with blood on his hands. Okay, um, he's up to no good. He's up to no good and living in a mansion. And now he can't live in that mansion because it was been raided. And now he ran to Texas. Okay, he can't even live in Mexico, um, because of what he's done. I mean, he was the Attorney General. He doesn't even feel safe in Chihuahua because of what he did, and he forces people that don't have the resources that he's, you know, how did he get those resources? But that's another story. That has these resources to buy even like $1 million home in the States or whatever, and live in, Sauce Braus, as my Oma would say, um, hiding away. And, because he feels more safe in Texas. Um, yeah, this is, what a rotten. What rot. He's just rot. And, yeah. So let's go to Laura and see what all she said. Let me back this up. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Thank you so much. Exactly. God is in control. Literally, as George Washington, these demons went to overthrow the government. Uh, George Washington did not overthrow the government. Okay. Um, the colonies, this is, something that we're not taught, and you have to go and research yourself. But the colonies had an agreement with Great Britain. Okay. Um, and the King George, broke that agreement over and over again, and wanted to charge uh, taxes of the American colonies, very high taxes, right? Um, without any kind of representation in the British Parliament. So it was taxes without representation. And that means you're a slave. That means he's a bully. He's a bully, and he's saying, "Give me your money. And I don't care what you have to say." That's what King George was doing. And because he breached the agreement, George Washington said, "You breached the agreement. There's no agreement anymore. Um, so we're not going to pay you taxes, and we are colonies, right? We are our own king. We are our own government, right? And of course, it was these United States, right? And it still is today, these United States. Um, so it was really King George being a total bully and understanding that he breached over and over again the agreement, the trade agreement. And of course, they sent over their magnificent navy to really uh, hit us very, very hard into compliance, um, to pay them taxes without any kind of representation. That's what that was about in a nutshell. I mean, it's much more complicated than that. And if you read the resolves, you'll understand. The Fairfax resolves explains all of that very well. And of course, George Washington didn't want anything to do with slavery. But the problem was that the slave ships from Britain from would stop in the Americas, and they would stop in the Northern American colonies first to sell off to the deep staters, okay? Just like the human trafficking right now. Uh, President Trump doesn't want anything to do with that. And he wanted to shut that border, right? He wanted to not shut the border, but he wanted security at the border to stop the criminal trafficking. The same thing with George Washington. But because they knew, and this was George, um, the other George, it'll come to me. But these ships, when they left our colonies, they would go to the Caribbeans. Okay. And it was brutal there. Matter of fact, they had ships full of Irish. The Irish were also enslaved ships and sold as slaves in the Caribbean. Um, and they all died. They couldn't handle it. And if you've lived in Ireland like I have, you get, 70-degree weather, and they're like, oh, it's roasting, it's roasting. They just can't handle that kind of weather. It's just not, um, they're just not made for that. They get burnt. They'll even post up all their sunburns when it's like 75 degrees. They'll, they're so happy to have some sun, and they'll get sunburned. But so going to South America and into the Caribbeans, um, they just couldn't survive it. The slave ships that went to the Caribbeans, the life down there was brutal, brutal. So many and it was only like 14% of the wealthy landowners in the colonies would purchase these people, as many as they could afford. Um, and if you go to Mount Vernon and you read and you see their life there, they had, yes, they were slaves, and George Washington owned slaves. But, and they took on the name Washington, and they had great love for him, because of the schools, because of the health care he gave them, because of the living conditions he gave them, their own church. They could absolutely start their own life, their own burial area. Um, and he worked very hard to try to change things so that they could get some training and get a productive job to end slavery altogether. So, you know, the whole narrative about slavery and everything is a false narrative with the mainstream media to divide us. It was much more complicated than that, and uh, you know, you've and were there evil owners in the colonies? Yes, that was the problem. There was an enemy within. There was, a divide, a huge divide, and there were so many attempts on George Washington's life. But if you read and see his works, his life work, and he's the only one. He freed every one of his slaves upon um, Martha's, I think it was his or Martha's death. All of them were freed. Even Jefferson didn't do that. So he was very against slavery, and in a very it was a very bad internal battlement, more so than with Great Britain. And, Great Britain had this magnificent navy. In 5 years, George Washington built our navy. 5 years. He, um, with all of that, the whole navy thing is remarkable. And it really reminds you of President Trump, this spirit to move very quickly and build very quickly, inspire people to build very quickly. And our Navy absolutely um, defended us against the biggest, baddest Navy in the world at the time, which was the British Navy. So, I just think that there's a lot more to everything than what the media wants us to know. And they really seem to always want to divide us instead of, explaining the truth and educating and that which would really make us know that we're Americans. All of us are Americans. And we should just be so happy for our freedoms and fight for them. And be happy that President Trump, right now, it's very clear very clear. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming that he's fighting for our freedom. So, they have the saying, first in war, first in peace, first in the hearts of the countrymen. That was what the people said about George Washington, right? First in war, first in peace, first in the hearts of the country, of our countrymen. I think that that's what people are going to say about President Trump. I really do. Um, it's amazing, and I'm not saying he's perfect or anything like that. I'm just saying he's got a huge battle, and he's doing pretty good for um, all the enemies within that he has to deal with. So go after Hillary Clinton and the Pizzagate. Um, yeah, they really covered up the whole Pizzagate theory. There's enough evidence that that's was whitewashed. Of course, with her emails and her servers and all of the crimes that she's committed. And I think that he might go after her because her crimes are so severe. Her crimes are just so severe. So we'll see. We have to rally behind President Trump and around his administration because, there's just, right, you're either with him or against him, right? At this point, you've just got to be with him. And um, yeah, it's very clear. Just like George Washington was about to lose the war, we were almost in the same situation. Absolutely. Absolutely. We would have just been slaves. We would have been we would have been serfs. That's the word for it, serfs. Just to work to pay taxes, and we're like that now, aren't we? Um, and this whole thing with credit cards and everything, it's just most people just work to pay all their bills. That's serfdom, totally serfdom. And then what do we pay our taxes for, right? We pay our taxes for these agencies that are not doing their job. That matter of fact, that they are protectorates for the criminals and not doing their job for the people. So, yeah, I want my money back. I really do. I want my money back because 15 plus agencies, and now we have like 23 agencies. And, finally, with this president, if he wouldn't have won, I don't know. It was just absolutely a big green machine. Well, the thing is that even through those 4 years, we were winning. God was winning. So it was amazing what was happening, even. But now it's, thank God, turbo. We've got that institutional support, which is so important. So I had a friend that worked at UMC and said many of the witnesses said they said there were multiple shooters, and how many people have died in the car accidents or accidents at their jobs. Yeah, absolutely. And we know that there were multiple shooters. There were multiple shooters, we know, and I would say multiple locations, locations, because the videos showing the inside of Walmart and the outside of Walmart, it just doesn't add up. It's just like this whole thing with Charlie Kirk, it just doesn't add up. I meant to say our President Trump is a George Washington. Oh, yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. He is. He's like and when you look at how many attempts on George Washington's life, um, y- you really understand what to have our country. It was hard fought in 1776. Um, most of the casualties were chaplains. I don't, that really shocked me when I learned that. They were the absolutely godliest men that our country had, and they were targeted. They were killed. By 1801 or 1802, the premier uh, um, Harvard University, right, had really taken the Trinity out, had taken Jesus out of its curriculum. They didn't believe it anymore. So, really early on was this denial. And that's because the British during the War of 1776, they targeted the the major Christian thinkers, the theologians, the chaplains. As a single mother of four daughters and his father in cartel, they are literally hunting us. And I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. We, you know, I think you can be rest assured that, well, I don't know if you can be rest assured. I can't even imagine your situation. I can't even. I hope that you're packing. I hope you're packing. Um, um, it's, um, my choice is a revolver. My choice is a revolver. Um, not my husband's choice, but my choice. Um, that it is just, it's very, let's just say there's now you have a chance. Now you have a chance to um, get justice and to live in peace. Because look at what the designations, the executive orders. the actions to blow 3 of those ships out of the water coming off of Venezuela. Wow. Wow. To say that they're international, they're non international or non national. This is a confusing term. They're just saying that they don't belong to a country. That's what they're saying. They're non national. That's what it is. They're non national. These are cartel. They do not belong to a country. So I'm just wondering if that applies to this Mormon faction, right? Because they really don't belong to the country. They're, acting um, independently of it and with a criminal intent. So, with the cartel, with, um, yeah, so this is his President Trump's designations, what he's doing. Uh, it kind of goes over my head sometimes because of all the legal part of it. But he is absolutely serious about making America great again. And that means making El Paso great again. And where making Texas great again. Because how Texas goes is how the nation goes, and how the nation goes is how the world goes. And that means Mexico. So Texas is the epicenter, and I would say El Paso is the epicenter of this internal battle of with the enemy within. Yeah. So honestly, we will let it play out. They cut off your money supply, so we will ride it out in El Paso. But if anything happens to my daughters, please rest assured I blame the same people. Yeah, Judge Victor Salas said no, we can't because they're literally, according to CPS, as a mother of 5 and a child under 10, I can't have guns. Please investigate me and my children. I will give you all the evidence y'all need to go after these demons. Well, President Trump is already going after them, right? Because if he reinstates or builds the whole judicial and law enforcement system, I mean that's what's going on here, right? Um, then then the crime can't work with impunity like it has. So, absolutely, I'm gonna. Yeah, we're doing everything we possibly can. I think we're doing everything we possibly can to behind the scenes to get justice in El Paso and in Juarez, Chihuahua, and in Chihuahua. And that's why this whole thing with César Peniche is so powerful. Yeah. Well, I've been on for a long time. Oh God, yes, we pray every day. Yes, absolutely. Uh, something is going on, right? Something is going on. That's way better than like a year ago where they were absolutely operating with impunity. So now we can absolutely change our lives. We absolutely have this, and that means really supporting President Trump and his administration. And that's why I'm wearing the hat. Um, and I know you have to be brave to do that in El Paso because you have these demons there that have Trump derangement syndrome or whatever. They don't want law enforcement. Well, that should tell you something, right? So, yeah, so be careful. Be very, very careful. Take care of yourself and take care of your children. and 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 know that we are absolutely doing everything behind our scenes, and it's things that you wouldn't expect. See, that's another. It's things that you don't expect. Um, that is making all the difference. So, yeah, and I hope you understand that. Thank you so much. Okay, good night, everyone, and